Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining us. We're going to have an awesome session with Ashkan. I'm just going to quickly go through his bio. Ashkan is an applied data scientist with expertise in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning, and graph analytics. He received his PhD in information systems engineering with an emphasis on AI-based decision support systems. He also carried a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship in health informatics at the University of Florida. He is currently a senior research officer at National Research Council, NRC, Canada, for the Government of Canada's largest research organization, and an adjunct professor at Concordia University. His research aims to leverage advanced analytics to solve real-life problems in various domains such as healthcare and scientometrics. So today, we are very lucky to have Ashkan in our Science of Science stream. We've been doing a lot of sessions like this. Hopefully you could catch some of those. So feel free to go to ai.science to see more sessions like this. I'm going to give a quick motivation about Ashkan's work before we start. So essentially, Ashkan's work studies how governmental and federal funding in Canada is fueling research and development. In principle, the amount of investment in research and development is regarded as an indicator of potential for economic growth, although this is not 100% correlation, but at least in advanced economies, this trend is seen more, and this is a stronger correlation. But because of the uncertain nature of scientific research and translation inefficiencies from research to product innovation, and consequently to economic growth, and of course the financial constraints that governments have, there's always a limit on how much each country can invest on research and development. It's therefore important to have policies that enable and amplify the work that our scientists are doing, but at the same time also, have ways of monitoring the alignment between the kind of work they're doing and the strategic economic objectives of the country. This is currently a manual process. We'll get into it and talk about it a bit. And by nature, because it is very peer review based kind of process, it's very, very subjective and lacks a systematic assessment of what is the return on investment that we're doing and how well are the outcomes aligned with the strategic plans that the country has. Research on this kind of topic is fairly new, and it comes in many flavors, I guess many brands, for example, Science of Science or Meta Science or Scientometrics. These are overlapping, but not necessarily the same thing. And hopefully today we'll hear from Ashkan about some aspects of these. And Ashkan's work is unique in the sense that it provides a view into the performance of the Canadian scientific community, and especially they focus on natural sciences and engineering based on the data for nearly 2 decades. I have a long list of numbers that they provide in the article. I'm not going to go through those. Hopefully Ashkan will mention some of those. But there are a lot of very interesting numbers in the paper that you should definitely take a look. So thank you for being here, Ashkan. Let's get started. I guess first thing that we usually do in these sessions is that we just quickly go through a few concepts that you will use in your presentation, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page. So one of the first things that you mentioned in the paper is that in Canada, there are 3 funding agencies that fund scientific research. There's NSERC, there is CIHR, and there is SSHRC. Can you just very quickly tell us what these are and how they are different?
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, Amir, and it's a pleasure to be here today. And I hope that you have all started a wonderful day. It was a wonderful summary. Thanks a lot. So yeah, the three different funding organizations that you mentioned, there are the three main federal bodies who provide funding for researchers. So basically, NSERC is focused on natural sciences and engineering research, established in 1978. And then we have SHERC, that is focusing more on social sciences research, and CIHR, which is targeting medical research.
Perfect. So then you go on and say that your work is an example of scientometrics. Can you just give us a high-level understanding of what scientometrics means?
Yes, exactly. So as you mentioned, it's under the umbrella of science. So basically, you're analyzing. It's the analysis of scientific output, or let's say it can have different forms. Actually, could be either scientific output or scientific collaboration patterns. But the thing is that now here we are analyzing the metadata around research and science.
Right. And what you're specifically interested in is extracting research topics that people have worked on over time, um, and and just the analysis of how that aligns with the strategic priorities of the country. So you talked about topics like topic modeling, stationary topics versus topic evolution or trend analysis. Um, so if you can talk very quickly about what are these things on very high level, and then you go on to say that you specifically use STM, structural topic modeling, which is different than LDA that a lot of us are typically used to. So if you can just draw a very quick picture of the differences of these topics and how you decided which to use.
Yeah, sure. But if you don't mind, maybe I can go to the next slide, because here I'm going to provide the two main line of research that I'm involved with at the
Mhm.
moment, because the topic that we do have today is actually one of the sub-projects that I'm working on under the intelligent decision support systems. So here we started this in 2010. And here we are trying to come up with some sort of decision support systems that facilitate the decision-making process for research evaluation. Um, Specifically talking about today's topic, which is the paper that you mentioned earlier in the talk. So this is basically focusing on the one of the last pieces of the puzzle. So which is, okay, we have invested some money, some significant amount of money, and now we want to analyze where has that money really gone. So basically now we are focusing on the research output of those funded money to see if they are in line with the priorities, and if they are also evolving, and if they are evolving, how they are evolving. So that's one concept. The other thing that you mentioned is about the topic modeling. So basically, in very general sense, so in topic modeling, you're trying to find hidden patterns in the textual data, and then put documents into the groupings, into the groups. And I think, as most of you like LDA is one of the most common approaches for topic modeling, introduced in 2003. And the difference between STM and LDA, I would say, they are very related, but in STM, basically, it's not an static model, because in STM, you can basically introduce a covariate into the model, and then you can estimate the effect, different effects. One of them, which is of our interest in this research, is topic prevalence. So you can introduce covariance like date of publication, and then you can assess topical prevalence over time.
Very interesting. So if I understand correctly, then you use STM, structural topic modeling, specifically because you're interested in the evolution of topics over time, rather
Yes,
than just what general topics exist.
exactly. Yes, and the other thing to add that is that here you can add variables like covariates into the model.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And one of the general challenges with topic modeling in general is, how many topics are there? like which is a general problem that clustering methods have. And you go with this interesting pattern of a multi-layer way of determining how many topics there exist. So you first set rough bounds by what you call C measure and D measure, and then you make it finer using MIMNO coherence measure. Can you just very quickly tell us what those things are?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is very challenging, like coming up with the exact number of topics, and you know better than me, is highly dependent on the objectives and also the problem that you're trying to solve. So for this specific reason, I guess, and I think automatic approaches wouldn't be a good solution for this problem. And by this intuition, we try to come up with a multi-layer approach, like trying to tie different approaches to benefit from the strength of each of these approaches. As a first layer, like you can use any sort of indicator, and you can, there are many of them out there. Like we just got the best results with C and D measures. And the other thing here that we did is that we built several baseline models. So we actually selected LDA to be our baseline model, and then tried different baseline models for each year of the examine time interval to refine further that wide range that we got from the C and D measures. And in that sense, you can also use like other indicators like MIMNO's coherence to also assess the output of those baseline models. But what I would like to say is that one of the key elements here in this multi-layer approach is the pool of experts that we do have at the end. So it's not an automatic approach at all. You can consider it as a semi-automatic, but at the end of the day, there is 3 judges, and we intentionally select odd number of judges because to reduce the subjectivity effect. And those 3 experts are the ones who know about the domain, who know about the problem, and also who know about the scientometrics field. And this is the last layer that we use to come up with the exact number of topics for the problem.
Very interesting. All right, so I guess we've gone through most of the concepts that I mapped out. So maybe at this point, it's a good time for you to just go through the presentation so that we make sure everyone understands the topic a little more deeply, and then we can have some discussion about it.
Yeah, sure. All right. So yeah, as I mentioned, like I have 2 lines of research, and right now, like these days, most of my time is dedicated to medical informatics, but the research that I'm presenting today is under the decision support systems. So let's go over the general problem here that we are trying to tackle, and it's about the huge amount of money that is being invested. So you know that like R&D activities, they can be considered as some major influencing factors of a country's position. And then in Canada, like a huge amount of money is being invested on R&D, aiming to get to foster like scientific development. So now, on one side, like we have funding organizations that are investing heavily, and they're also establishing like a strategic roadmaps. They're setting strategic policies to support R&D. And the problem is, okay, who is the right researcher, or what is the right team to allocate money to? And then on the other side of the problem, we have researchers who are competing for limited resources. So you can imagine that like on both sides, there are some, it's sort of problematic, because on the researcher side, if you're competing for limited resources, it can come up with some sort of bad habits, like for example, like publishing at whatever cost, more publications, more money, these sort of patterns that you could observe. And on the funding organization side, identifying right researchers could be really challenging. Right now, as Amir mentioned, like most of the time is based on reviewing system and some indicators that that organization use to find the right teams. So here I'm gonna quickly go over some network centrality measures definition, because you may see them in the coming slides. So let's just consider a hypothetical network, as you can see here. And then one of the concepts is degree centrality, which is basically a super easy one. And it accounts for the number of direct connections that a node has. And by node, I mean a network is consists of nodes, circles in the figure, and then edges that connects nodes together. So if a node is more connected to the other nodes, then it has high degree centrality. Here you can see an example of a node with high degree centrality. The other concept is bitwitness centrality, which is a way of detecting those nodes who are sort of influencing the flow of information in the network, and you can find them like you can find them at the intersection of the connected clusters. The other concept is closeness centrality, which is a way of detecting nodes that are able to spread information efficiently through the network. And basically, these are the nodes that are close to the other nodes, I would say, on average. The next centrality measure is eigenvector centrality. So basically, these are the nodes that are connected to other nodes that are also important. So basically, these are in our specific case, you could consider them as researchers who are important and also connected to other important researchers. And the last measure that I would like to mention is clustering coefficient. So basically, is the likelihood that the neighbors of a node are also connected together. All right. So as I mentioned, like, this is not a new research that we are doing, but we are trying to put pieces together to make the to make the final solution. So far we have done like the different sort of sub projects. We have analyzed the structure properties of the networks among researchers. We extracted patterns, we extracted profiles, for example. And by profiles, I can mention some of them here, like gatekeepers, as I mentioned, are those guys who have high bitwitness centrality. And one of the patterns that we observe is that, for example, in the founded researchers network, we have mid-career researchers with a lot of direct connections who are playing the gatekeeper role. And the other pattern that we observe is, for example, local influencers. Those are the nodes with high closeness centrality. And we realize that in the funded research, in Canadian funded researchers network, these are mostly productive researchers with easy access to financial resources. And these sort of profiles reside in specific locations of the country. And then we also focused on the different sort of patterns that we could observe for, let's say, for different gender. And in 2016, if I recall, we released the first prototype of the AI-based decision support system that could help decision makers by predicting the productivity of a researcher in terms of number of publications and impact of research, as well as the desired level of funding. So that was the story so far, but today I'm going to focus more on the paper, which is about analyzing research projects evolution and their alignment with the priorities. So here the problem statement is, as I mentioned, is that where did the money go really? So there's money invested, there's some research projects that have been done over time, and then now we want to see what are those projects, and if they have evolved, and if they are aligned with the top research priorities in a more objective way, rather than a reviewing system. Okay, so the data of the research. So first of all, we considered NSERC because NSERC is the main funding organization in Canada. And then we collected funded researchers' data from NSERC within the time period of 2000 to 2018. And then using a Scopus, we extracted scientific publications of those researchers. Here, there are some considerations that I would like to highlight. One of the problems is when you use different data sources, one of the problems is that how you're going to integrate them. So one of the problems that we had was, okay, in NSERC database and in Scopus database, we have different naming conventions. So, for example, you need to do author disambiguation in order to be able to link them together. And by author disambiguation, I mean you can have multiple authors in these two data sources that share the same name, but you don't know if they're exactly the same person. So you need to disambiguate this. And the other thing is that you can have one author with multiple name variations in these different data sources. So this was one of the challenges in integrating these two data sources. Here is the conceptual flow of the overall solution. So the data part we discussed already, and then the rest is sort of common approach in doing topic analytics, topic modeling, and text analytics. We first pre-process text, and then using the pre-processed text, we did some descriptive analysis and we extracted key phrases. We also checked the key phrases over time to see if there's an evolution, and then we used that document term frequency metrics that was produced by the text pre-processing engine to do the topic modeling. And in topic modeling, we followed, we have different subcomponents, I would say, to identify number of topics and also to do the research of evolution analysis. So now, again, a little bit of terminology here, because you may hear that in the next slides. So basically in text mining or text analytics, we have words, and basically it's the basic unit from a vocabulary. And then by words, by a sequence of words, you can have a document. And when you put a collection of documents together, then you have a corpus. All right, so topic modeling, as we discussed like earlier today, like it's an approach to put documents of in a corpus into the groups, and as Amir mentioned, it's not the only method that you can do this. So you can basically put that under the umbrella of clustering techniques, and then there are lots of different approaches that you can do. You can take to do topic modeling. LDA is one of the most common one. I try to make it super simple here, like by putting it under the just three steps. So first of all, you need to identify the number of topics, and then each word that appears in the corpus is randomly assigned to one of those topics, and then in an iterative manner, these topics are further refined and getting updated, and at the end of the day, you will have your topics over the corpus. STM is very similar to LDA. You can consider that as an LDA-based method. And here the only difference is that you can introduce metadata, as we discussed, like you can introduce covariates. And in our case, we introduced publication date to be our covariate because we're interested in analyzing the topics evolution. All right, so let's go to the results. And I'm gonna start with some sort of descriptive analysis results. You can see here the number of publications trend over time, and as expected, it's an increasing trend. You can also see the share of Canadian publications, and by Canadian publication, we assigned a publication to be a Canadian publication if at least one of the co-authors is affiliated with a Canadian institute or is located in Canada. So there's a significant increase over time comparing the beginning and end of the examine period, but part of this could be due to the higher coverage of the higher coverage in the Scopus database. The other thing that I would like to highlight here is that in NSERC specifically, they have some specific programs targeting strategic projects. So those are the projects that are that are highly in line with the top research priorities of the country, and then here you can see four main target areas for strategic projects at NSERC. So you have advanced manufacturing, you have ICT, you have natural resources and energy, and at the end you have environment and agriculture. One thing to consider here is that ICT has received the most proportion of the funding after 2005, I would say. And the other thing, the other interesting pattern is sinusoidal pattern that you can observe for all these 4 categories. All right, so before jumping in to topic modeling and extracting topics, one of the main questions that we had to solve was to see if there is really a temporal evolution, because if there's not, then there's no need to do like a dynamic topic modeling. For that, we use 2 different approaches to confirm the existence of temporal evolution. The first approach was that you can see in figure 3, the final result of the first approach. So basically in this approach, we considered pairs of year and top 30 key phrases. And by key phrases, I mean n-grams of length 2 to 4. And then using these pairs, we constructed a 2-mode bipartite network that you can see here. And on top of these bipartite network, we did community detection. So here, and the community detection result is represented by different colors in this figure. So if all those nodes, let's say, if all those nodes are grouped into one community, then you can say that, okay, there is no really evolution or difference between these different clusters of the nodes. But here, as you can see, you have the beginning area colored in blue, and then you have, for example, the ending period colored in orange. So it seems like there is some differences and there is some evolution. And to confirm that, now I'm talking about figure 4. So to confirm that, we did correspondence factor analysis. And by that, so you're basically, again, using sort of the same data, like frequent terms with some conditions, like the terms should be appeared at least 300 times in the corpus, and then they have not been appeared in, if I recall well, like in more than 60% of the documents in the corpus. And then you basically, you take the first two principal components to get visually appealing information and to infer if there is a temporal evolution. So here you can also see that there is a U-shaped curve that confirms the existence of a temporal trend. All right, now after confirming the existence of temporal trend, we switched to the structured topic modeling, and we extracted 8 topics out of the corpus, 8 being identified by that multi-layer approach that Amir mentioned earlier. And here you can see the 8 topics, like from nanoscience to healthcare and disease. And also in the figure, you can see the dominant topic distribution across publications over time. And here, there's some stuff that is really interesting. One of them is that analytics, I don't know if you can see my arrow, but analytics has been the most dominant topic in the examined corpus. All right, so after extracting the topics, we switch to the estimating the effect of the covariate to get the topical prevalence of the extracted topics. And here you can see the evolution of the topics over time. And there is some patterns here that are explained in detail in the paper, but I'm just touching some of them. Like again, talking about analytics, it's been the most prevalent topic after 2009. And there's a decreasing trend observed for mathematics, colored in blue, which is sort of interesting because to me, it was, I may consider that as a part of like more multidisciplinary research, because these sort of fundamental fields like mathematics and physics, they are contributing to the other fields, and then although the trend is decreasing, but definitely mathematics topics is highly correlated with analytics and even maybe healthcare and disease topic. So this is, I would like to mention that one of the other advantages of STM was it also considers topic correlations in the process of extracting topics, and at the end of the day, you have a nice graph of the topic correlations to further investigate if the topics are well extracted. All right, so that was the main findings of the research, I would say. And then having, so we observed the evolution of the topics, we extracted the main topics, and then the last piece was, okay, if they're aligned with the Canadian top research priorities. So for that part, one thing that I would like to mention is that we are still working on this part, because this paper was the first attempt toward this solution, like to find the alignment. So for this specific paper, we use experts, because one of the main challenges is that you have different funding organizations, and putting all those strategies and policies all together and integrating the data, even if it's available, it's super challenging to integrate them. So we use experts to check the alignment and to clarify that if the research projects were aligned with the country's priorities. So here. This paper actually, what I would like to mention is that one of the goals of this research that we are still working on is to come up with decision support systems for peer reviewers. So at the end of the day, it's not going to be a replacement for any process or any, let's say, reviewer, but we are trying to come up with a tool that incorporates multiple aspects of research activities to come up with some numbers, that could be helpful for the decision makers to find the most appropriate researchers or research team, and also to check the alignment. So I would like to wrap up the talk here. Yeah, so if you have any suggestions, any ideas, or if or let's say if you see any opportunity for collaborative research, please get in touch with me. Let's share those ideas, and maybe we can do a project together. So I'm putting my LinkedIn picture here, which is sort of different from my look these days, but thank you all for the time, and please feel free to ask any questions that you would have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashkan. I do like your current look. Just putting it out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So awesome. So I'm just gonna quickly check my understanding. So is it fair for me? Like, I'm gonna try to summarize the claims of the paper in just, you can correct me if I'm not right in any places, or if you want to elaborate anything. So essentially, the first claim of the paper is that this is the first attempt at an objective assessment of the performance of Canadian scientific research, specifically in the area of natural science and engineering for now, and to check their alignment with federal funding targets.
Yes, so let's say the alignment part, because to check the performance of Canadian researchers, we released the first prototype in 2016. If you would like to learn more about that, there's a paper named ICR, so you can check that. It was published in Scientometric Journal in 2016. And that decision support system specifically assess performance of researchers in terms of the number of publications, and also the impact of their research in terms of the number of citations, and also the impact factor of the journals that they're publishing their articles in. And also it provides some tools to predict the deserved level of funding for those researchers. But this piece that we discussed today in details is tackling mostly the last part of the sentence that you mentioned. So it's trying to see if the research has been aligned with the top research priorities of the country.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so and then another part that you emphasized was that there has been similar work before, but they never bothered, or they didn't get too much deep into the hyperparameter tuning.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little as well?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I also mentioned some references in the paper if anyone wants to learn more about those sort of research that Amir just mentioned. But I don't want to criticize others' works because definitely they know more about their own research and all different aspects of that research. But one thing that is sort of suspicious is that when you check similar studies, one of the first things that you see a lot is that number of topics is equal to 10. And the first question is why 10? So easy answer to that would be because it's a default number, default number for that default value for that parameter. So in this specific research, we try to tune all the parameters that are involved with different modeling aspects yeah, in the pipeline.
Right. Okay, makes sense. And just to put everything in context, can you say a few words about how this type of research analysis is done currently? Like, it is a manual peer-reviewed process, right? Because you made a point about this method being more objective. So I want to put it in the context of how is it done now that is very subjective.
Yeah, so this part actually is we are further expanding this research, and by that is that in this research we focused on funded research publications, right, and assess their evolution and alignment. But the other piece of the puzzle is that what is the relation between funding proposals and research output? So right now we are trying to link these two together, which is a bit tricky because, well, better than me, when you even if you have access to funding proposals, they are all true positives, right? Those are those are the proposals that were successful in securing money. So you don't have any information about the proposals that were not successful. That's one thing to consider. But well, this is one of the assumptions that we do have in this expansion of the research. But what we are trying to do is that if we can relate funding proposals to the projects, and then you can answer a lot of questions there. So what is the novelty? So if a specific researcher activities is also evolving over time, so you can imagine different sort of research that could be done by linking these two together. Yeah,
Makes sense. So you also, again, another part of your claim was the hyperparameter tuning, and most importantly, the number of topics. And the approach that you took was a semi-automatic multi-layer approach where you set sort of a rough bound, then you refine that bound, and then somewhere in that mix you also use human experts to just decide what the right value is. Can you just very quickly go through that one more time to make sure that everyone understands that bit?
Yeah, sure. So this is absolutely right. Like we have tried to take different steps to take advantage of different approaches that are available out there, and also to make this process automatic as much as possible. So one thing that we couldn't escape, and I think it's not feasible with the current state of research and the current available data in this specific field, is actually one may say that it's feasible, but what I mean is that it's risky to do it in a fully automatic way. So
Right.
that pool of expert that we added as the last layer in this approach was super critical, because I'm gonna elaborate more on that. So first, we provided those three experts separately with the extracted topics, and also with the top keywords and key phrases, the intensive set of keywords and key phrases. And each of them separately came up with the label. If the the label was sort of consistent among over all the experts, then that was the label decided for that topic. But if not, they have to discuss why they see a different label for that topic. And then at the end of the day, we use the voting system to decide on the exact topic of the exact name of the topic.
Makes sense. Okay, so now we have a semi-automatic way to choose the number of topics. And one thing that I noticed is that you kept the number of topics fixed over the 2 decades of your data. And one thing that came to my mind immediately was most probably the number of the strategic priorities of the country has changed a lot over the 20 years. You know, there were different governments, there were different, you know, people making decisions. So, you know, how do you justify that choice that the number of topics is constant over time? Because if you're looking for alignment, doesn't it make more sense for that parameter to also change with some major other parameters that you have?
Yeah, this is a wonderful comment. So for this research, we tried 2 different approaches. The first approach is the one that you see in the paper. The other one was let's build a different model for each year. So we had in that approach, we had 19 different models with different number of topics, and then try to somehow relate those different models output over time. So basically, doing this, we realized that STM is working better, and that's why we decided to go with STM, and STM takes a fixed number of topics to build the model. So that's one thing. The other thing, which is back to your super valid point, is that this solution, if you consider it as a tool, it's a living tool. So you need to maintain it, and you need to update all the parameters using a frequency for that maintenance or update. Let's say every 6 months or every year, to make sure that it's in line with the new updated priorities that are coming out.
True. I think as you were responding to my comment, one thing that came to mind is, generally speaking, topics that you extract from text have a bit of a hierarchical nature. So potentially, if you had a relatively fine grade, like let's say if over 20 years, you know, there are periods of time where you had 20 topics, then you can probably group these together to align, you know, the groups of topics with other priorities that existed in different years. On that topic, I guess another thing that came to my mind when I was reading the work is that, generally speaking, you know, scientific documents are very long and complex, and they're very structured. And topic modeling is very successful on shorter text, like news articles and things like that. So how do, like, I think you only use the abstract and title to get around that problem, I believe. But you know, is that an issue in the analysis that you're doing, or you know, is that not a very important concern?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. And one thing to add to the previous question, based on your comment, is that you can definitely do this study at different levels of granularity. So here in this research, we're more interested in, let's say, general themes of research in Canadian researchers' publications, but you can do it at different levels of granularity using different number of topics. Back to the last question, which was about, what was that exactly?
The complex structure of the document usually means that the topic
yes.
and through the document evolves.
Yes, so yeah, it seems like I'm getting old anyways, but yeah, but yeah, so there are lots of variations of topic modeling techniques out there. Some of them are specifically focused on shorter text, but in this research, I found like STM to be super helpful and super practical on the corpus that we did have, like putting abstracts and titles together. And one of the other things that I'm investigating right now is that I'm specifically focusing on the methodology sections of the papers, because there you can also see if there's been a technological or methodological evolution over time. And even on that, although my data set is super limited right now, even on that, the STM is not performing poorly, I would say.
Okay, makes sense. And going back to your approach for deciding the number of topics, so you, I guess, one major claim that you have is that your approach is objective assessment of the research topics, but still, you had to include human experts in making the call at the end, and that's not a criticism of your work. Like, that's a very typical thing for clustering and topic modeling and things like that. You always need domain knowledge to come in and say, this is what these bunch of words mean. So can you comment on that a bit, and how did your work, and obviously your attempt here is to make it more objective rather than
Exactly.
completely objective. So can you talk on that a bit?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, as you mentioned, it's more objective. It's not the most objective approach, and we're working on it. And the other thing is that you need to consider, okay, what is the other solution? The other solution is manual assessment, right? And is it really feasible to go over, let's say, over 140K publications and to extract topics out of them? So, and if it is feasible, what would be the cost of that? How much time you would need for that? And could you do that by a single reviewer or single person for this sort of assessment? So to wrap it up, we are trying to come up with a tool that facilitates this sort of assessment, and definitely is not the best tool yet, but we are trying to make it better.
Definitely. Have you considered, like you said, you used 3 human experts, and I suppose 3 is just the limitation of how many people you have access to. Is there any way, like, I guess one way to get closer to objectivity would be including more people, like sort of crowdsourcing the labeling process that you have. Are there any approaches out there that can achieve that?
Well, crowdsourcing, to my view, wouldn't be a good solution for this, because you need to have domain expertise, to come up with good informative labels. And the other thing is that you're also collecting the labeling information. So over time, the goal is over time to make even this piece automatic. So let's say if you do this, let's say 100 times with different experts on different projects, and maybe you can train a model on that, to come up with a good label for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. All right. So, like, going back to one of the fundamental motivations of your work, that was, that was essentially evaluating if scientific work is aligned with the federal objectives and economic growth milestones and things like that. And I feel like looking at a problem statement, a statement like that requires you to have a better idea of, there is these number of publications, and that number is probably growing exponentially in a lot of fields. But is there a good way to measure how many of these works are novel? Like, there's this famous example of how I discovered that apples fall, and then a bunch of other people start publishing papers about oranges and pears also falling. Do you know of any methodology, or did you include any assessments like that in your work?
Yes. Yeah. Not in this work, but right now we are focusing on narrower fields or subfields. So specifically, one of those is AI ecosystem. So we are specifically focusing on focusing on AI, on Canadian researchers who are involved with AI. And there, checking novelty is also one of the things that we are considering. As the first step, what we are doing is that we are checking similarity between research that are being done by a researcher over time. So you have document similarity measures that you can consider to check this similarity. And we are expanding this, we are working on it. And this is definitely one of the pieces, as you well mentioned, that is necessary for this sort of research.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay, so you also mentioned, like in your results, like I guess moving on to your results section, you mentioned that some of the patterns that you see are probably justified by multidisciplinary nature of some of these publications. Is there an easy way for you to essentially account for that? Because I don't remember from STM, but at least in LDA, you get probabilities of all topics. Is that a way to account for multidisciplinary publications?
Yeah, the easy way that we considered is, as you mentioned, because STM is also a soft clustering approach, so each document can belong to multiple topics and you get probabilities over them. So let's say if a document is assigned with more topics, then maybe you can consider it as a, let's say, more multidisciplinary research. So that was one of the indications that we investigated, but we didn't incorporated the results in this paper because they were super preliminary.
Definitely. All right. So I guess my last question before we wrap it up, we have a few more minutes. It's more of an interpretation kind of question. So you showed that there is a correlation between trends in research topics and what the priorities, the federal priorities have been. But as you also mentioned, there is a bit of a survival bias. Essentially, one interpretation of the result that you're showing here is that as a researcher, I wrote a grant application, I used some language in this, I was successful, I got the funds. Then I subsequently, published a paper and probably used the same language in the publication because it was funded by, etc. And we all have been there. Like we get funded, and when we are publishing, we need those publications so that next time we can get funded again. So there's a bit of a logical loop, I feel, because what we're finding here is that there is obviously there was a barrier of acceptance of the grant application. And then, we're just finding that there's correlation between what the grants were saying and what the publications were saying. Is this a strong enough evidence that there is impact and alignment?
Yeah, but that's a very good question. So here in this research, we don't have that linkage between funding proposals and, let's say, research output. And we are specifically focusing on funded researchers' output to see the evolution alignment. But as I mentioned, like one of the projects that we are doing right now is to link funding proposals with the research output, as you well mentioned. Like then you can see you can extract actually patterns. If some researchers, for example, are using some specific terminology to secure funding. For example, let's say if AI is hot topic these days, so if you add AI keywords to your funding proposal, it's gonna make it more probable to get more funding. So these are the things that we are investigating at the moment, but definitely linking these two could be really interesting as a future research direction.
Definitely. I think like two interesting things that come to my mind at least is, as you also mentioned during your presentation or one of the responses, thinking and including the failed applications to remove a bit of that survival bias. And the second thing is, having a measure of impact rather than just, whatever researchers write in the papers. I think would help with this, with having a stronger interpretation of results here for sure. Regardless, this is an impressive work. I'm really glad that we got to talk about it. I really enjoy myself. I have no idea how the past hour passed. We have a few more minutes. Do you want to say a few last words? Any call to actions again? All yours.
Yeah, sure. I just want to thank you all. It was a real pleasure being with you today and sharing this experiment. As I mentioned, please get in touch if you want to do collaborative research together, or if you have any suggestions or ideas that you would like to share or discuss.
Definitely.
Thanks again.
Yeah, of course. Do you want to put up your last slide again so that people can see your email address one more time?
Yeah, sure.
Close it up.
There you go.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashkan. I really appreciate you spending the time with us. I know it was a little challenging for us to find the time, but I'm really happy that we managed to do it. Yeah, thank you so much. And for the audience, hope you enjoyed this. Please go to ai.science, create an account there to see a lot of the other talks like this. They're all freely available. And hope to see you in near future. Bye.
Sure. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.